Hello, BookTube. It's Tuesday, a very torrid Tuesday here in Boston. You might be able to hear the hum of the AC unit in the window. Ordinarily, I turn all those kinds of hums off for my videos, but it would heat up pretty quick in here if I did that. And even then, don't have anything to complain about because a lot of places in the country and the rest of the world are getting it a lot worse than Boston is. But today is a warm day in Boston, and the next 4 days are going to be genuinely hot. But Tuesday is also the time for tags. And there are a whole bunch of fun tags going around, and I will do them. But I have an original tag for you today here on the iPad mini. This is the home construction book tag. And the first prompt is 2 days, tops. And the question is, name a book that you were explicitly lied about. And for me, I don't have any specific book. Because if you watch my channel, you know I get lied to all the time about books. I read pub sheets from new releases all the time that say this is the greatest thing since seltzer, since sliced cheese. And they never are. The books virtually never are. They never live up to the lies that their publicists tell about them. I know it's the publisher's job. And I know that publicists now and in the past, this is not just a woe of the 21st century, often aren't all that familiar with the book that they're hyping. They often haven't read it. So maybe a little bit of overstating is necessary, but I don't need a specific book here in this case. Then prompt number 2 is, if we don't do it now, it'll be too late. And the prompt is, name a totally unnecessary book. And for me, I want to stress a kind of book here, and that is literary sequels done by their authors, where the author is induced from either failing mental faculties or a bad need of money to write an inevitably disappointing sequel to a work that has become a classic in their own time. I jotted down The Testaments by Margaret Atwood, which was, I'm no big fan of The Handmaid's Tale, but The Testaments was a farce compared to it. And also Closing Time by Joseph Heller, a sequel to Catch-22. Mind-boggling. In the 10 years after Catch-22 arrived, he would have sued vigorously anyone that wanted to write a sequel and would have punched someone who suggested he write one himself, and yet he did it. A totally forgettable book. And here, in this category, I am not including Go Set a Watchman by Harper Lee, because it is a weird, strange book. The more I think about it, the more I want to reread it. It's very much meant as a counterpoint to Kill a Mockingbird, and not as a sequel at all. Of course, it's thematically, tonally, vocabulary-wise, it's completely different. Adding all sorts of fuel to the speculation that Harper Lee never saw a word of it, much less wrote it. I'm not including it. It is a valuable book. It is extremely uncomfortable reading, which can be valuable on its own. It's certainly not what I'm talking about, like, for instance, Closing Time. It's not anything like that. Then prompt number 3 is, this will be cheap, probably free. And the prompt is, what's the most hideously expensive book that you've ever bought? And for me, it's a big hardcover 2-volume set, oversized, old thing, of the portraits of Hans Holbein. Each portrait is presented in full. This is an older book, it's like a 100 years old set, so it's got that onion skin protecting over the portraits, and the portraits, of course, are in sepia tone. They're not in color. And each of those portraits is accompanied by pages and pages, as much as we know, of the circumstances of composition and also the identity of the person sitting. Holbein didn't just draw kings and Thomas More and Thomas Cromwell. He drew or sketched everybody at the Tudor court. Every single waiting maid, every single Shelton or Wycliffe or Cheney, every single little foppish courtier, anybody who could sit still for a minute, he painted or drew or sketched. And this book collects them all. This two-book set collects them all. It was expensive. I saw it on the Brattle pricing table. The Brattle bookshop has a big pricing table right as you walk in the door. And I didn't want to let it filter out into the shop, and I didn't want to run the risk that it would disappear, so I spent more money than I should have, but I have gone back to it, as you'd be able to tell if you took a look at those books, because they are in terrible shape. But what's yours? What's the most expensive thing you've ever bought? Then prompt number 4 is, you won't notice we're here. Name a book that constantly gets in your way. And for me, it's Nicholas Schrader wrote a book called Tilt, which is a book about the Leaning Tower of Pisa, about its original construction, all the personalities involved, about its slow shifting over time into being the unmistakable landmark that it is, its future, the architectural wonders that have been done to shore it up and keep it from falling over, all of which would be fascinating. But the publishers decided to make his book, I don't know if you've ever seen it, they made his book at a tilt as well, so that when you put it in a bookcase, it sticks out. And I was constantly snagging stuff on it, knocking it over. Eventually I had to get rid of it. Not because it's not a good book, but because the form got in my way constantly. So maybe it was a gamble that paid off for other people. Maybe they like it. I liked it too initially, but not in the long run, no. Then prompt number 5 is, no, this isn't asbestos. And the prompt is, name a book that was really, really bad for you. And for me, it's a book by Gail Eisnitz called Slaughterhouse. And it's a deep dive look inside the world of industrial pig farming, the industrial meat industry in the United States, which doesn't horrify you only because you have very carefully insulated yourself from knowing anything about it. If you know anything about it, it will haunt you. The more you know, the more haunted you will be, unless you don't have a soul. The details are harrowing, and I knew that ahead of time. I knew what I was getting into. I just didn't expect the book to hit me as hard as it did. Then number 6 is we'll clean up at the end of every day. Name a book that was a total mess. And for me, again, I'm not going to use a specific book. I'm going to mention a type of book, and that is self-published books, the bulk of self-published books. Not the standout examples, not the exceptions, not the people who take a great deal of care the way they should, but the people who think, yeah, it's no big deal. I have read so many of those. I read one of those a day. I review one of those a day. And so many of them are so embarrassing. Millions of little mistakes that add up. If you have 1,000 little mistakes in a book of 250 pages, you might as well have 1,000,000. It's the only thing your reader's going to be thinking about, and it's all preventable. It's quite a different thing if you submit a manuscript to your publisher. You can't proofread it. You have no control over that. You can apologize to people when they're in line to sign for you to sign your books at a signing because there's a misprint on page whatever. But you had no way to fix it. When you self-publish, you don't have that excuse. You could fix it all, and you don't. I know there's so many self-published books out there that look self-published. They're letting the side down. They're making it all look rinky-dink. So I'm gonna say the whole of that. Then number 7 is, you'll love the results. Trust us. And the prompt is, name a book that blighted your life and made you seriously consider burning all of your possessions and going to Tierra del Fuego under an assumed name, living in a small village for the rest of your life, and when you finally die, thoroughly broken soul, having the local villagers say, we never really knew anything about him, but we saw him sitting on the wharf every night, staring out at the sea, with tears streaming down his face. You'll seriously love the results. Trust us. Name a book that blighted your life. And for me, again, it's a category. It's Google books, which ought to be, considering the powerhouse, the juggernaut that Google is, Google Books as a project ought to be utterly revolutionary. When we read about it 15 years ago, that's what it sounded like before Google got slapped with a few legal injunctions. It sounded absolutely revolutionary. That Google vans were going out to libraries all over the country, all over the world, and scanning everything in sight. Scanning every single book, over all of them. And we'll figure out the copyrights later, but these libraries are de-accessing and throwing away these books at a remarkable clip. Let's scan everything before it's gone and make it available to everybody. And there were, naturally, there were predictable legal problems with that because a lot of those books had existing copyrights, even though the owners of those copyrights had received nothing, no money at all, not even a dime, for years. But it isn't just the legal stuff that got in the way. It was also that it was poorly done. Google books are poorly done. They had, hands on them or a piece of an apple that somebody used to hold down a page that they are scanning. Stuff like that. Or the borders aren't aligned right, or the page is scanned 3 or 4 times in a row. Downloading a free Google book edition of some text is a nightmare. so annoying that after the first dozen times, I stopped doing it. And a project like that is worthwhile and doable. Even with tangled copyright, it's still doable, and it should be done. But anyway, that is the final prompt. The only thing remains is to tag people, and I tag, if you have a BookTube channel, and you can look to your right or your left and see an intact wall, I choose you. I tag you. If you have a roof over your head, then feel free to do the home construction book tag. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for Tag Tuesday, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.